I'm going to turn it over to Mary Jane, Jeanne, Tomas, Lindsay, Octavio, and Martin, who are all presenting together on an online multinational course that they taught. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ellie. Can you see the screen okay?
Yes, can you put the slides in presenter mode and then
Yeah, I know, I always have trouble finding that. Good, so hi everybody. So we're really excited to be doing this, sharing with you, and we're still in the process of learning and developing this course and the ideas that we're trying to deal with here. So feedback is really welcome. So just quickly, I'm Mary Jane Parmentier, Arizona State University, and I'm here with my colleagues, Lindsay Smith from Arizona State University, Octavio Mucino Hernandez, Arizona State University, and then Jeanne Simon, Universidad de Concepcion in Chile, and Tomas Carroza, Universidad Mar del Plata in Argentina. And Martin Comisso actually is not here. He's working on his PhD work, and so he's taken time to do that, which is important, but he was instrumental in the design and implementation of this course, so I do want to recognize him. Let's see, going to the next. Yeah, okay, so just going over briefly what our agenda is before I hand it over to my colleagues, and we'll begin. So we want to give you an introduction to what we actually did. This was a pretty complex multi-participant course that we did, but we did have some key design principles that we will go into. And then we're going to have an exercise where we try out some of our student activities with all of you. And the discussion of inverting, decolonizing the syllabus, you know, we've realized in the last day or two that this has been kind of a big topic, and some of the problematic issues with using the term decolonizing. We've set up a Jamboard, which I think we can put in the link for you. And that's there for you to go and post ideas. So barriers, sort of opportunities and challenges to decolonizing the syllabus. And then we have a second page that deals with knowledge mobilization, which is a concept that will be introduced. And we'll also show you some examples from what our students have done, and then final reflections. So we have an hour, and we have ourselves sort of internally timed as best we can. And I think we'll get started. So with that, I'll share the Jamboard, unless you have it there, Octavio. One of us will share it in the chat. And I want to introduce. Okay, perfect. Yeah. And Lindsay Smith is the first person I will introduce to go next. So I'll stop sharing.
Oops. I think that meant I shared the Jamboard, and what I wanted
There's
to
the Jamboard, yeah.
Okay, so visit the Jamboard if you have thoughts. We'll have some time where you can specifically do that. But I wanted to share our website with you. So it has all of the materials we're talking about. They're under Creative Commons license with attribution and non-commercial use. I don't know why you'd want to commercially use it, but there it is. Use them, edit them, download them. So someone will share that in the chat, because I can never find the chat when I'm doing this. So I, by random happenstance, ended up leading this wonderful, amazing group of professionals, scholars, and activists across Latin America. So we are a collective, and we've chosen the word cacho as our term, which we chose because in Spanish, it means a break or a small piece, un cachito. Cacho also means to break, and it comes from the indigenous word cach, or the Mayan word cach. So it has this embedded legacy of the colonization and the indigenous peoples that make up the region, and also its use in Spanish. And again, we want to think about digital tools and intercultural exchange as a decolonizing tool, but we also want to do that from a space of humility, where we want to break from what is, but again, we just offer one small tiny intervention into this, and we appreciate your kind of feedback and engagement with us in it. So our main breaks were around creating a multilingual classroom. So we were committed to a bilingual classroom, which was perhaps one of the biggest challenges, but we asked all students to do all their work in both English and Spanish, and we asked students to enroll to have either a basic familiarity with Spanish and English, or a willingness to try despite that, which some students did. And that the program and the course we taught was problem-based, research-focused, and it involved an international collaboration. And it was centered on readings which privileged the Global South. So just to give you a sense, this is our team. Not everybody's here, but they come from, we had a version of the class or a collaborator at Universidad de Guadalajara. We had a Jeanne, who's here from Universidad de Concepcion in Chile, and then Tomas and Jeanne and Manuela from Universidad de Mar del Plata, and then us from ASU. And just kind of one of the core ideas was to create a rupture with most online digital collaborative learning experiences, which often use English and English tools to kind of dominate the learning experience. We wanted to see if we could make a break with that. And we also wanted to introduce students to international research and international collaboration, but where they were forced to work or invited to work with others, but stay quote unquote in their lane. So each of our transnational research groups took on a global challenge like water scarcity, or a lot of people did coronavirus, but each member researched their own place. So Arizona or Mar del Plata, or where they were. So we came together not as experts about our own space. So I'm gonna turn over to Tomas now. Tomas, I'm gonna
show the principles.
Show the screen, but so we don't have to do it.
Right.
He's gonna go over
well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation or the opportunity to be here. Maybe my English is a bit rusty, so I have to apologize of that. That was a really intense experience, at least for me, and I think a very all of the group. We have to know each other. We have like a very intense process before to have this course prepared and launch to the internet and have everything prepared. So we make this course based on 5 principles that we try to put in action. We discuss all the principles. All the things that you see here were really discussed. We have an intense discussion. We agree on everything. It was a really nice process. I think for everyone, at least for me, was really beautiful. I really like it. And the first was to try to apply asymmetrical exchange and co-design. So all the participants, the instructors, the students work as co-designers and co-constructor of the course. We try to make an open and work with the epistemic humility. We work with open critique, with iterative creation. We incentive, I mean, no incentive, but we say all the time to the students and all of us that we can fail. We want to go beyond the typical course, and mainly because I think we want to go or try to think a different international course. We want to understand on how to stay all in the same position, all the countries, all the participants. The other part was really interesting. That was an inverted syllabus. So that we try to do is try to use both language text. That was a really interesting challenge. In Spanish, in English, try to put a work in that the students and the instructors look for a very diverse kind of text and both language, and have the challenge to use it in both language, and a lot of students didn't speak the other language, and we try to operationalize and work. And then the other principles was like safe and challenging learning space. That was really interesting because we start to design this course before the pandemic, and then we start and go into the pandemic. So it was a kind of coincidence, an international online course that worked in the pandemic, and and we have the pandemic and the political circumstances. I mean, in Argentina, in Chile, Mexico, United States, I think you can imagine we have really, I mean, we have a lot of meetings, and the meetings sometimes say, oh, in my country, there's a riot, and I can connect, and the students were in the same position. So all of these play a very important role, and we make an environment that the students and instructor can be really sincere and try to be respectful of the circumstances of all the people. And that was really nice too. This kind of they think of the affective reactions to the learning materials, to the research project, what effect had on us every action that we take. And the other principle was to learning by trying together. I think that you can see that we try to put all our knowledge and all our feelings and try that all of this stuff being reflected in the final products. That was that this research oriented towards meaningful outcomes. I mean, like the final products were very diverse, were like podcasts, videos, websites. We tried to make a real knowledge mobilization. That was one of the core thing of the course, and that was all the principles. But these principles are always in discussion because we are trying to follow with this course. So I think this is the beginning, and these 5 maybe can change, or maybe have to be, or maybe are going to be more principles in the future. But this is an abstract, I can say, of the principles. So now I give the word to Octavio, I think, or
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Tomas. Lindsay, can you go back to home, please, for a second? Great. Thank you. Yeah. So we had over 60 students in 4 universities. That means 4 countries. And interestingly, we taught this course in the 2020 spring semester, and you might remember that time because we had a very harsh transition, but we were kind of ready in this because we have been developing these ideas and co-designing this course for about 9 months before we began the course. And we had an 10 weeks window. So every instructor had his or her own students and his or her own management of the course. But in that window, students work as peers. So you will have students from Mexico working with somebody in Argentina or in the US. So you can imagine that it was a quite interesting experience in terms of allowing the students to be peers and also giving them a broad experience. We talk about this course as a possibility for a lot of students, especially in the Global South, so they can have this broad experience and have this research experience. So, so can you go a bit? Yeah. So Tomas just talked about the principles. So these were the core ideas that we had, like a common ground, like, like foundation upon which we start having the discussions. So these are like our foundational principles. And then we have the toolkit. We will have some exercise from that part. And these were designed to give tools for both the students and also for the teachers or the instructors. So yeah, we will have some of that as an example later. And lastly, our background. And here we are integrating. We are still in that process of giving our course theoretical background, a theoretical support in order for us to have a clear orientation of what is being done in hybrid critical pedagogies, for instance, or in international learning. And also, we're trying to integrate as best as we can studies and empirical aspects of our area of research. Yes, we work with the students in Google Classroom, and if we remember yesterday's discussion about like trying to find other platforms in order open source platforms, non-proprietary platforms, that's an ongoing exercise for us. Google Classroom worked pretty well, and the idea was to let the students share their ideas, their concerns, how they portray themselves to communicate in that space. And also some students use Zoom, of course, for their communication. And they also use WhatsApp. And so they were using the platforms that were more fitting to their connectivities, their places, and their practices. And we tried to be very understanding during this time, because we had this transition to online learning due to the pandemic. So we try to also take that in consideration in order to help the students to do the research, collect the data, and finally make products, things that they will be willing to share with their peers in the neighborhoods, in their cities, etc. So that will be a quick overview. So I'm gonna pass it to Jeanne.
Jeanne. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Jeanne Simon from the University of Concepcion, originally from the States, but live here in Chile for the last 20 or so years. I'm just going to talk real quickly about the idea of a knowledge mobilization strategy, which is what we ask the students to do that is a different way of mobilizing knowledge, essentially. So the idea is to connect research, and it can be research from different areas: natural sciences, engineering, anthropology, political science. And I think that's another point that we should highlight with respect to the different groups. They came from different interdisciplinary or different disciplinary areas, and they were put into groups that were multidisciplinary, international, and multilingual. And so it might have gotten a little bit too much, but the idea of the knowledge mobilization strategy helps us to kind of orient and to direct so that they think about the development work a little bit more. And so there are different strategies that we can use that can be to help to clearly communicate useful scientific knowledge, which, for example, could be like the podcast that Jai did that we saw yesterday. Can also be about translating or interpreting and adapting scientific knowledge for use by the government or other organizations. And then it could also be co-production, where you define it and you develop it essentially with communities, or it could be innovation. And those are just like the general ways that we usually think about knowledge mobilization strategies. But because our approach is decolonized, we also need to think about what does a decolonized knowledge mobilization strategy imply. And that's more of something that we've been working on, as well as other people have been working on. So it has to do with building non-hierarchical relationships between partners. And as you saw in the explanation about how the course was put together, was a slow collaboration between different partners to create the course. And then we sought to repeat those kinds of patterns as well, and to have students think about how to develop collaborative relationships with the communities with which they work, and how to create public value. In a sense, public value especially comes from, it can be social innovation, it can be different kinds of value, but kind of contrasting with more individual or economic value. Also, this is a concept that's very typical in Latin America, which is a diálogo entre saberes, which is essentially a dialogue between knowledge systems, which can be between indigenous and Western knowledge, between Western knowledge and other kinds of knowledges, between different disciplines. And so it makes you think about those kinds of issues. And then also to complement resources and capacities. I put here one of the, an image that comes from Imagining Future of Knowledge Mobilization from UNESCO, which captures the idea of more of indigenous ways of approaching it. It seems to connect with what Odessa as well presented in the different frameworks. So it's interesting to look at the different frameworks and to think about how we can decolonize the knowledge. I just wanted to show a couple things so that you guys can have an idea of what the products were that were created. So you have podcasts, you have timelines, you have web pages, and here the timeline down at the bottom was one that was put together through the international course, because I ended up teaching this course as well, but without the international component within our university. And so in this one, you were able to connect and see how the responses to the coronavirus, to COVID-19 is developing in different countries throughout Latin America. And then other examples as well, you can also translate knowledge, essentially taking scientific knowledge that exists and to put it into another kind of context, another way of communicating and thinking about who your audience is. And so here it can be Instagram, infographics, or a policy brief if you're thinking about policy issues. And so now we're going to do the positionality exercise so you can see our starting point, and then we'll come back and look at this again.
Hi everybody, back to me. I know it's a little whiplash. This is we're very collaborative, but so we are going to show you our one of the ways in which we tried to create teams that so we have a positionality exercise, but I decided instead to have you do our role-playing game version of research expertise. And so here's a link to a Google Doc where you can complete it yourself. So that'll ask you to make a copy and you'll get your own copy. And I'm going to share what it looks like. And this is using the idea that Martin actually thought of because he plays role-playing games a lot, to kind of use that same idea of points and skills. And that when you play role-playing games, if you do that, you kind of build a team of people who have different skills to allow you to accomplish your goal. And so this is trying to translate that into the setting. So sorry about that. Should be able to have this here, maybe. Okay, so if you guys have accessed it, so the first step that you have to do is to come up with your base points. And so we realize that different people have different levels of expertise because of their life experience. So everybody gets 35 base points, and this is an interactive design. So, and then you can put your age on 41. I'll get 41 points, obtain 3 degrees, and I have 2 kids. So I get a total of 97 points, right? And then you can go down here and you can assign those points to your skills. Like other people are going to have different amounts of points. And if you adapt this for your class, you could decide other things. So we decided parenthood transforms us, degrees matter, age matters, but you could decide other categories, but this is the way in which we assign points. And then I get to decide what I'm good at. Am I good at accessing information? Yeah, maybe a 1. Qualitative data analysis, I'm pretty good at that. Creative thinking, maybe I'm a 2. Like Spanish language skills, I'm a 4, you know. Oral skills, I don't like to talk very much. And you can see down here, your total points remaining go down. So there's more skills and points than any one person could fill up. And then your final option here on our form that we created was for you to describe a research superpower. So if you had like a skill that isn't here, like this is what we thought of as a group, but some other skill that's really important to you, like AJ and John have jam sessions, like bringing the party or whatever to research, right? So that could be your superpower. So this is kind of what we created for people to be able to speak to a new group of people about their skills, and for that group to organize itself in a way that they could kind of think about what project they were going to do, how they were going to approach the challenge that they were facing, whether it was health and healthcare or water scarcity or extractive mining, and then how they were going to configure their team to kind of address that challenge. So I invite all of you guys to fill out your own, and we're going to put you in breakout groups so you can discuss this process and whether you learned anything about yourself, or maybe how you would make this form different, or if you would use it for your classroom. So, and maybe we can have 3 people per group, Ellie. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yes, 3 people per group.
Are able to access it if you want to. And like in my group, we had a question about whether students are good self-assessors of their skills. And I don't know that we could evaluate that, but we did find that by forcing people to kind of create their research profile, people claimed those areas. So it led to like more responsibility taking within the research group, because people claimed like, I'm the quant guy. And so when it came to the group needing someone to do quantitative work, they would do that. So I'm going to turn over to Mary Jane now.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, we had a similar discussion in our group, wondering if, how accurate the students assess their skills. And I just sort of off the top of my head, I was thinking there were certainly, some who didn't have the skills they thought they did, but then others took up showed skills that they didn't think they had, which I think was, also really interesting. So, okay, so what we thought we would do next is give you all a chance to sort of think about a course that you're teaching, or a course that you'd like to teach, or a course that you have taught, whatever's relevant to you. And on the Jamboard, we have 2 pages, and we'll deal with the first page first, which is decolonizing your syllabus. And if you can see it on the first page, decolonizing your syllabus, what are some strategies and what are some challenges? I think this would be really interesting to see, because we've sort of talked a lot about the concept, but specific things, so for instance, we as a group looked at our own syllabi and looked at, we asked ourselves, so what are the colonial legacies of our syllabus? And we have Octavio and Martine are both in a program called the Human and Social Dimensions of Science and Technology, so the STS field, which is predominantly, white Northern men, right? Those are the authors when you look at a syllabus. So those are kind of the obvious things, I suppose. We also, we explored our own positionality and thought a lot about how that has informed our syllabus. And for me, I'm, getting towards the end of my career. I've been teaching this for a really long time. I have some really entrenched assumptions that I need to dig down and sort of question myself. So what do we want to take a few minutes and let people kind of go and write stuff at this point, Lindsay?
Yeah, I think that's good. So we were just going to use the Jamboard.
Yeah, because we're doing well time-wise. We'll do knowledge mobilization next. So yeah, so let's take until 12 o'clock. So that's 6 minutes. And let us know if anybody's having trouble finding the Jamboard. So it's page 1 of the Jamboard. And go ahead and this is a new app for, I think, a lot of us, the Jamboard. Oh, people are already putting stuff. So you can just sort of pop up some Post-its and we'll just be quiet here for a minute and let you think.
I was just going to add that we thought that if we just built an international team across 5 countries, we would do a lot of the work towards decolonizing our syllabus. And what we quickly discovered is that we all read the same few authors from the global north. So it was much harder. I mean, I think we've talked to scholars in the global south who are like, it's easier to find the new Duke University Press article book than it is to find one of my colleagues' new texts, right? So, so I think these are real challenges. They're not just like a fault of our interest or attention, but actual structural challenges. So we'd love for you guys to share your solutions or your approaches to that.
Yeah, somebody's written, go to local regional presses and countries of focus. Non-academic materials. I've gotten a lot of ideas from this workshop on that, actually. Literature, music. And Lindsay, you started the course off, though, with reading a poem in English and Spanish that was, I think, really impactful.
Yeah, I think lifting the language barrier was incredibly helpful to us. Like just saying students would have to read in a language that wasn't their first. That said, we had tons of American students who dropped our class. So, there's discomfort in that practice as well.
Yeah. Oh, Ida says it's raining heavily in Burkina Faso. Send some of that rain here to Arizona. It's over 100 degrees and blazing hot.
You can have some of our rain in Indiana if you'd like.
Hey, blow it on over here.
I'll do my best.
Me too. Gee, everyone's chilly and we're just like, it's kind of hot here.
Or you can see what.
Oh, great. Great, yeah. I love that. Guest speakers from social movement organizations. again, that would get at the bilingual aspect for, at least for our course.
I love that question of, can you decolonize an existing syllabus, or do you need to do it differently? That's why we kind of developed this idea of an inverted syllabus. Like, what would it be like not to add, but to invert? Like, what if we were to only center authors? It was very hard. I mean, it sounds very good in practice, but we found that even though we are spanning, 2 continents, we found it very hard to do that. But.
And also, just to complement, it's also very challenging outside of the global north to decolonize, because essentially it's like the journal prestige, and so we value what's created in the global north much more than what's locally created, at least in Chile. And so a lot of times our challenge is to do that as well here, and to connect it to the territories where we live and work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the comment under challenge is misaligned with the rest of the program or other courses. So I think, students at different institutions, and someone, I think Dan had asked in the chat, how do we deal with differences in students' tuition and that sort of thing? And we essentially didn't. We had each institution work within their own needs, right? And then we met at a sort of what we hoped was as neutral as possible, our Google Classroom. But it also meant that, it was up to each institution to see how the course would fit in with the students' programs. And that's still a challenge we have, because if it's an elective class in the US, it's harder to get enough students to enroll. This is great. This is actually going to be really useful for us.
I think we also discovered real resistance to this, this practice, both by our students in Latin America and our students in the US. Like, this was not frictionless. And someone asked about like the ultra liberal agenda, and I don't even think it was that. It was just like the discomfort of different ways of thinking. Well, maybe Jeanne can speak to it better. I know Chile, she ran into a lot of problems with, or more of a pushback.
It has more to do with it has more to do with like the knowledge mobilization strategies in some ways, as well as decolonizing. But in some ways, decolonizing, you can, you have to address it in a different way in some ways. And so I'll explain it a little bit, but to think about collaboration and how do we create these horizontal relationships of collaboration is a challenge. In Latin America or Chile is different in a lot of ways from the US. I'd say there's less pushback with respect to certain issues, but less action. That's another discussion, I think, maybe. But it is, they're just different kind of challenges. And so you look to kind of make small changes, I would say, and is what I try to do, is to just keep moving forward and to change things. And in that, it helps that as someone from the US, but living in Chile, gives you a certain position that you can criticize more than others can.
Yeah. So should we go ahead into the knowledge mobilization? And Octavio had one slide too, Jeanne, that had some examples from our courses.
Yeah.
So if we want to share that, and then we're going to have a breakout session.
Just, I'm supposed to be helping with the chat, and there's a couple of hands up, so I don't know if you want to address those now or. Oh.
Actually, we were going to do, we were going to do questions and answers at the end. We're going to try to allow about 10 minutes for that. But I would say too, I'm happy to be answering some questions in the chat. So if somebody wants to post something, but we'll have time to open mics. So here's Octavio. You're going to talk about the exam. These are examples from the course, actually, of the final projects that students did on knowledge mobilization.
There you go. There you go. So these are 4 examples of these meaningful products that the students created in order to share with their peers. And they are also the result of our knowledge mobilization strategies and efforts. So the first one is about direct cash transfer in Latin America during the COVID pandemic. And that included Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, and they made a website. They did research about that. Somebody mentioned, what about neo-positivist methods? That's of course a problem. There was research embedded in this. And after that, we tried to help them to create these outcomes so they will be easier to communicate among their peers. And the second one, at the right side, is it was a short video about extractivist agricultural practices in India. We had a student from India, and I think that also in Argentina. And next we have a video about the use of music in order to express the struggles of indigenous populations, people playing that music with a contestatory message. And lastly, we had a survey about the, this was about water resources and also extraction. And they finally created a podcast for that purpose. So this is just an example of the kind of products that they created. Again, this was just in 10 weeks. So we think that they did a pretty good job and we'll learn a lot from them. So I'm gonna pass it to Lindsay.
I think it's Jeanne, right?
Yeah,
Jeanne.
I think it's
Jeanne.
I'm going to try to do this kind of quickly so that we can have some time to have a conversation. So just kind of to explain the process. So you already did it. Get to know yourself, and the context is where we started with the students, and those were the initial activities, as well as the formation of groups where they had to pick out the research themes. So we had a list of 10 themes in general that had to do with different kinds of development issues, and they were organized into groups, international, multicultural, and bilingual groups. And then they had to start working with the supervision of one of us, working on defining the theme. So then they move on to the research design. And here the idea is they have to develop that horizontal collaboration. So they have to consciously connect and listen to partners or the target audience, depending on how they conceptualize it, when they're designing the academic or applied research. So because we have knowledge mobilization, and so that needs to be considered there. They also have a stage that's collaborative capacity building, or could be, where teams and partners generate and interpret knowledge in collaboration with the different groups. It depends on how they work, and we gave options, as I'll explain a little bit later, if they wanted to concentrate more on like the translation, or if they wanted to concentrate more in capacity building. Then they had the research communication, which is specifically had to do with the mobilization of knowledge, like from that language. Then as well, because I come from a public administration department, the idea was also that they really consciously think about how to evaluate the creation of public value or values as well, or social values or change generated in the process. And that can also be something that we use within development work. And then finally, to think beyond the short term, to think in slow collaboration, and to think about how to maintain contact and connect to other networks, as well as maintain relationships with the people who they began working with. And so here's just a brief description of the different kinds of activities. So the positionality exercise, but we also had to do with an analysis of a stakeholder analysis, as well as scientific studies, great literature, different kinds of reports that was available. And that is to be able to define their problem. Then you also have the collaboration. And here, the collaboration can be between different levels. You have collaboration between peers, you have collaboration with stakeholders. And so we encourage them to reach out contact with experts from different disciplines as well, to get a more complex understanding, as well as to think about dialogue between different kinds of knowledge systems. And so based on their experiences, which I think Ken, also mentioned that in different kinds of positions, but essentially to build from their own knowledge and from their values in relationship with others. So here I put one example for that our students did to get information outside of the classroom. So they had to actually go beyond just the great literature and to contact and collaborate. So that here they set up a different kinds of questionnaire on Facebook or different kinds of platforms that you can use to get an idea of what the audience wanted, thought, etc. Then we also looked at the collaborative capacity building as well. And those were some of the examples as well, where they mobilized knowledge. And so it had to do with example, one was a Google Classroom that taught to generate better understanding of how extractive industries work in different countries. And so they considered the different countries, I think it was Mexico, the States, and Chile. They also used Facebook as well as a platform to be able to do that, where you had different kinds of learning activities, or I guess, yeah, teaching, learning kind of activities that they would do in Facebook to generate reflection among the people who would join their group. You could use Padlet, Jamboard, Mural, which are similar to what we talked about, or do it with Zoom. One group also set up maps where they put together different kinds of locations within the map as ways of building, capacity building, but not their capacity building, but rather with the communities with whom they were working. And then now we're at the small group discussion, where we want to ask you guys to think about a common theme based on what you've seen, where you can think about interests and knowledges that you could put into your own syllabus, as well as to think about which kind of mobilization strategies would be more useful for your students as well. To think about accessing, translating, co-production, and innovation. As I mentioned, in our case, we let them choose different ones, although you could easily focus just on one or another.
Jeannie, I'm wondering, since we're down to 9 minutes, I'm wondering if maybe we should, instead of the breakout, that we stay in plenary, but have people go ahead and address that question, because we'd really love to hear your ideas about how you might incorporate knowledge mobilization, how it could be a decolonizing tool. So does that make sense? Yeah, Daniel says 9 minutes left. So let's, invite responses to Jeannie's question. And then we can go from that into other, general concluding comments and questions.
And I guess one of the last kind of conversations we wanted to have is about this question of collaboration. I think we really began to realize that at the center of our work was our collaboration, and how we created a sustainable transnational collaboration. And then also what kind of collaborations, what does that term mean? How can it be done equitably? And so we would also love your thoughts and insights about that.
It looks like Ken has a hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I appreciate the project. It echoes a lot of what we are trying to do. But I don't know, to be provocative in the last 5 minutes, I want to raise the question, collective mobilization of knowledge to what end? This is the perennial question on social justice. All right, so we're grappling with this idea of, you know, we have this escalating inequalities in the societies that we're living in, and this topic came up earlier. So I guess for me, I'm not sure how this team is dealing with this question of, I don't know, justice, fairness, in addition to sustainability. So I just put it out there because it's the shift of changing and values, right? We're living in a society where globally now, the universal value is more is better, right? That's the universal indicator of success. The more we have, the better. Ricardo mentioned things like collaboration and dancing and so forth. I think that's a different sort of ethic. But anyway, where in the discourse does the question of social justice feature, or the issue of to what end and who gets what? Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say it was actually really central to all of the problems that the students worked on. So for instance, the group in Arizona was looking at extraction of uranium and health issues, and then the pandemic on the Navajo Nation in Arizona, and then parallels with pollution in extractive industries and pollution, right, and environmental justice.
And maybe just to compliment as well, is because you had the readings beforehand and throughout. So similar to Odessa's course, you had the readings to think about in different ways about the issues that they were seeing. And then in the way they defined the problem, where we encouraged them to define the problem, had to do with more social justice issues.
Yeah, and I think that the part of, I mean, for me anyway, the knowledge mobilization piece, which is new. I mean, I hadn't had students do that as for final projects before. You know, typically they write papers, but that was kind of the whole point, was to address, you know, stakeholders in a very social justice way. And so there was one group, I think in Chile, Jeanne, who wanted to find out, how can we create information for parents about the safety of kids going back to school during the pandemic? So these were very locally focused, you know, stakeholder engaged sorts of projects.
Odessa also has a question.
Odessa does.
Yeah, I thank you for, my question is, I guess, around material exchange or resources, and to complement or in addition to like the collaborations that are more about ideas, I guess, and how, and also the resource imbalance between the students and communities can actually, it's what's fundamental to the power and dynamics, and that can, you know, impact the collaboration in a very subtle but true sense. And so we are also, you know, we are also grappling with that right now and how to manage it. And so I was wondering about your thoughts.
For me, it's a little bit easier because I teach political science, and power is central to political science. And it's one of the things that well, the class that it's actually, that I put this into is called Taller of Political Analysis Workshop. And so essentially politics is central, the issue of power is central. And what I wanted them to do is more than just analyzing power, how do we use this power to change? But that's going to depend on each class, because each of us put it into a different class. For example, another colleague put it in a research class. And so it just kind of changes the way you look at it. But the whole issue of power is central.
And just, we really focused on group self-organizing. So the first couple of weeks was really about relationship building. So we had students bring up, I mean, it sounds silly in the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, we had them go on walks together and have coffee together and eat foods together and spend time together. And so, you know, we really centered this positionality work in the midst of relationship building before we even got to like identifying problems and addressing problems. And at least from the feedback we got from students is it created a really strong relationship, the basis for a relationship of trust between students, because, and partly the bilingualism, I think it forced everyone to be vulnerable. One of the interesting outcomes was that a lot of Latin Americans began to recognize kind of their own internal colonization. Like I think people came to the group saying, oh, like North America is bad, we need to decolonize North America. But like Argentines were like, well, you know, like what are the limits of a written survey? Like who do we not get into our conversation? How can we use WhatsApp? And, you know, students, with COVID, students had crises, we had to change modalities. And so like, you know, we centered relationship and also constant reflexivity through these really, I mean, we had groups of 5 and each of them had a mentor. So like this was a time intensive, slow relationship building thing, which I think caused people to drop out because it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't an easy course. I think it was a fruitful course, but not an easy course. And I don't think those addressed, like, they don't eliminate power imbalances, but they allowed power imbalances and resource imbalances to always be like a topic for conversation. And, you know, even mental health challenges, like, I mean, all of those kinds of things got to be discussed in the space of the group, which wasn't really the space of the classroom, because the group could be via a WhatsApp, it could be via Zoom, and they got to auto-organize that. And so, and a lot of groups are still friends and collaborate from the future. So it was kind of like less about outcomes and more about process, I think, which again, doesn't solve it and probably doesn't align with the university's goals, but was like one of the ways we tried to decenter the kind of like learning objective checkmark model of education.
Yeah, and it looks like Evan's point is in line too with that other question and what you were saying, Lindsay. You know, how do we deal with, how do we have equitable, fair collaborations? I mean, I think in one way, having it online, you know, it was only people who have access to online, but with universities across the Americas, that was possible. People did have uneven internet connection, right? I mean, some students with the pandemic were home and didn't have access to Wi-Fi. And so we were very flexible with the groups. So some students, you know, were able to join the meetings because this was synchronous and asynchronous, by the way. I mean, the Google Classroom was asynchronous, but we did have Zoom meetings, and then the smaller research teams did meet. But, you know, the students couldn't always meet. They had to work or they didn't have internet connection. So that was something we had to be very cognizant of.
As
TikTok, llegado a los últimos segundos. Okay. Yep, 20.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you so much for participating in the Jamboard. We appreciate all that feedback because we are teaching this again in the fall and making changes in it. And again, as Lindsay said, it's an ongoing slow collaboration and a process.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. That was a fabulous presentation.